What's going on, everybody? How we doing? We're talking best ball. Just got done talking little Niners action. If you're a Niners fan, definitely go check that out. It's gonna be, you know, it's gonna be a nice little talk about the Niners and see what we're doing here. Right now, we're getting ready to talk a little bit of best ball action, something near and dear to my heart. Gonna see if we can try and tackle the elusive first place takedown in the in the big contest in DK this year. Um, for those of you who don't know, been pretty successful in best ball. Five-figure profits the last 4 years in a row for me. Second place a couple of years ago after a heartbreaking Najee Harris terrible touchdown at the end. Back when second place was, not $1 million, was $250,000. Still really nice takedown. But on my way to maxing that contest out. I got about 70 entries so far, looking to, make the second half as we lead up to the season here. But we're going to talk through some of the guys I like so far, some of the guys that I think are going a little bit too late, and also some of the guys that I think could be rising pretty quickly here. Talk a little bit about my own personal strategy and how I approach best ball. Really going to focus more on DK for this conversation because that's where I played the majority. I just like the format a little bit better with PPR. You get two extra roster spots as opposed to over on underdog. I am going to be playing some on underdog though. But yeah, let's get into it here. All right, guys. So here we are, another year. Um, Best ball, I think, is one of the more fun things that has kind of come about with fantasy sports. Obviously, play DFS, but I really enjoy drafting and building teams. Me personally, I like to do slow drafts a little bit more. When you can, once you get a little bit closer to the season, they do cut them off. So if you've never played best ball before, I really recommend getting into some of the slow drafts kind of early on. I think it's one of those things where, it just allows you to think about the process of your team a little bit. You can queue up right now. I've got 20 slow drafts going. Well, I guess one just finished, so 19 slow drafts going on right now. Um, One of those things where there's a couple different philosophies out there. I'm going to talk through it a little bit right now as I kind of see drafts going so far. I really think that, especially on DraftKings, people are disrespecting some of these much larger, much more improved, just bell cow running backs, right? Um, like I just see Derrick Henry going outside of the first round, sometimes in the mid second round. And I know he's getting older and things like that, but like that's a guy that I'm more than happy to take a chance on, right? Another guy who's going toward the end of the end of the first round, as far as a running back or into the second round is Devon Achane, right? Um, the Dolphins are, who knows what the Dolphins are going to be, right? But Jonnu Smith had 110 targets last year. And everyone, I guess, is just assuming that those are all going to go to Jalen Waddle. Um, I think it's going to increase A-Chain's target share quite a bit more. So, like, he's a guy that I'm really prioritizing and drafting, right? I really, really like him. Um, Especially if you can get him in the second round, right? Another guy who just, I think as far as, I'm going to stick with running backs here to open it up, going around pick, ADP right now is 52 is a guy in Chuba Hubbard. Um, now one of the things that some people will say is, I don't, there's a lot of pretty good players this year, right? That have that bye week of week 14. If you guys don't know, week 14 is the last week in the first round, right? To get through in advance. So, can be a little tough there that, man, I don't know if, he's something, he's a guy, will get too many people in that week. But I mean, you got to get the points to get there, right? And there's really nobody behind Chuba Hubbard. Um, I'm not really scared of the guys they signed. Again, in the draft I'm looking at right now that's live that I took him, his ADP is 52 right now on DraftKings. He fell to, pick 58. And guys going around that range, people, someone took Travis Hunter right before me, right? Someone took Debo Samuel a little bit earlier. Like, I am I'm much more willing to take a guy like Chuba Hubbard over Travis Hunter and over Debo Samuel, right? Like, he's the guy. They gave him the contract. you know Another guy that, like, I see a lot of the fantasy, like, pundits out there just, really down on, that I've just found myself taking quite a bit. And lo and behold, he just got a contract, is Kyron Williams. I hear all about the efficiency, the efficiency, the efficiency. He did it on short, 1 yard touchdowns and blah, 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 blah. And it's like he doesn't have the explosive rate. Okay, like, I don't really care how the touchdowns get scored, right? They've got Blake Corum behind him, who's really not shown anything. They drafted Jarquez Hunter this year, who, in best ball, the great part about it is Jarquez Hunter goes so late towards the end of the draft, where you can draft both of those guys. And if Hunter does emerge as more of a pass catching back, great, maybe he can slot into your lineup a couple of these weeks, right? But I just think that's a guy that's just going way, way too late, um, for what he is and what he is to his team, right? Another guy that, like, I just find myself drafting a lot is Brian Robinson Jr. I'm looking at a slow draft that's live right now. He's still on the board at pick 81, right? They drafted a rookie. They've got Austin Eckler there, but, like, Brian Robinson is the guy, right? And who knows what's going to happen with the Terry McLaurin thing, but, like, Brian Robinson is going to get the lion's share of the touches. He was a little bit banged up at points last year, which hurt his production. In the best ball, advances, right? Week 17 last year in a really good matchup against Atlanta. Only 8 points. 4 points in week 16 last year, and a lot of people see that and go, he burned me in the advances last year. But, like, you know, uh, he had 10 touchdowns, right? So, like, what are we really talking about, right? We're looking for guys who can get to double digit touchdowns, and I think that he is really one of those guys, right? Like, the running backs that go around where Robinson is going right now, in ADP. Let me pull it up real quick. Okay, so you got, like, Tony Pollard. I would much rather have Brian Robinson Jr. than Tony Pollard, right? You go down a little bit more. Jordan Mason is right around there. You know, I really like Jordan Mason, but he's kind of shot up the board now. I was taking him in the hundreds earlier, which is why I do like to start drafting a little bit earlier, right? Because it shows you some of the, you know, advantages that you can get, right? Earlier in July, I was taking Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones in a lot of these drafts. So, you're getting the best of both worlds there. And in best ball, you don't have to pick which week those guys go off. It's just done automatically for you, right? But, like, I'm taking, Brian Robinson over those guys for sure. Let me look at the board here and see who just went off, and Brian Robinson's still on the board. Aaron Jones goes off before Brian Robinson. Probably would rather have Brian Robinson, right? You know, David Montgomery went, at pick 70, and we're at pick 81 here. I would much rather have, we have no idea what that offense is going to look like this year, right? And I think that they're just going to feed the shit out of the ball to Jameer Gibbs. I mean, why wouldn't you, unless he gets hurt, right? So, like, you're getting a guy, Isaiah Pacheco. I like him, right? But, like, you've got other guys like, Caleb Johnson, who's in a timeshare going at, win at pick 64 in this draft. It's one of those things where I would just much rather have a Brian Robinson. He's not the end all be all, but I think he's a really good value for kind of where he's going, right? Um, and then my last guy I kind of want to talk about is Chase Brown. They don't have anybody else, right? They have, the rookie that they drafted. You can take him late. It's a nice, easy pair with Chase Brown, but Chase Brown's going to be the guy. It's got P Ryan there. okay. Zach Moss is, unfortunately has that really bad neck injury, released from the Bengals. I don't know that he's going to get picked up anywhere else, right? So I mean, it's Chris Brown's kind of show, and everybody is, I love the Bengals, right? But DeMar is going, consensus first overall right now in most drafts that I see, right? I've taken first overall. T. Higgins is going really high. Burrow's going 2 to 3 rounds earlier this year than he did last year. Burrow, love the guy, right? But zero rushing upside. Now the Bengals defense probably going to stink again. We all know that. But it's just one of those things where those are some of the running backs that I'm just kind of gravitating more towards this year, especially on DraftKings, guys that pass catching upside, the whole 9 yards. So, um, if those are what we're talking about. We're talking about quarterback, right? The only two quarterbacks that I am taking somewhat early, um, I'm taking some Lamar Jackson and then Josh Allen. I really like Josh Allen for the pure simple fact that you can stack a lot of his pass catchers with him, um, and it doesn't cost a whole lot. Don't love at all that Khalil Shakir is now dealing with the high ankle sprain, right? But it's early enough on in camp that I think it's going to be okay. Keon Coleman, right? He's a guy that, I think is poised for a pretty solid second year breakout. Josh Palmer, who is going to get targets on this team. Um, the MO is out for what the for what the Bills want to do. They want to try and run the ball. Ray Davis, right? Really nice option with Cook holding in. I still like James Cook, but you can stack. I've made some stacks with like all of these guys on a team, and it is really pretty easy to do. So the Bills, Josh Allen is really the only person who you have to take early, right? And if you're taking somebody like Josh Allen or a Lamar Jackson, I'm typically only drafting two quarterbacks in that setting. And I'm just prioritizing everything else. The max I usually take is three quarterbacks, and that's really if I wait on quarterback, which leads me to my next guy who, again, we just talked about the Niners and Brock Purdy. Sneaky runner, right? Obviously, I'm a Niners fan, but you can't deny the fact that the Niners by far have the easiest schedule out there this year. I mean, it's not even fucking close. I mean, it is just like you look at the games that these guys play, and it's just like, you know, the NFL really, really wanted to help the Niners succeed this year. And I say this being a Niners fan, and I'm obviously fine with it, right? But you can't ignore when Brock Purdy is going at 110 to 115 overall. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. They're playing, here's the 49ers schedule: Seattle, New Orleans, Arizona, Jacksonville, Rams, Tampa Bay, Atlanta, Houston, Giants, Rams, Arizona, Carolina, Cleveland, by week 14. And then in the knockout rounds, here's who they play: they play Tennessee, they play Indianapolis, and then they play Chicago in the last, in the championship round. Home, right? I don't think Chicago's going to have the greatest defense in the world. They certainly didn't last year, and I don't know that it's that much improved this year, right? With a non-defensive coach at the head coach, you had Eberflus last year, who was supposedly a good defensive coach. Didn't really see any of that. But for Brock Purdy to be going at 110th overall is just it's just flat out criminal, right? You can wait on quarterback this year, right? I'm looking at a draft right now. We're at pick, what is it? Pick 89 in a slow draft. Here are the quarterbacks still on the board: Baker Mayfield, Bo Nix, Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, right? And then here we go, all the way down here at, at ADP 104.1 right now is Brock Purdy. You got Caleb Williams going at 111, right? You got JJ McCarthy going at 117. Like, they're really, most of my teams, I am not taking quarterback early, right? There's just no real reason to do it, in my opinion. You've got Drake May, who's a runner, going at pick 116. Herbert, say what you want about Herbert, right? But there's a lot of guys in here. CJ Stroud, I think, can be much improved again this year. They added Christian Kirk. You know, they're going to have a pretty solid passing attack this year. You've got Trevor Lawrence at the Jags and Liam Cohen are your thing down at, ADP 131. You've got Penix down at 135. So, like, you do not have to take one of these quarterbacks early. I love Burrow and I love some of those guys. Don't get me wrong, right? But, like, if you know, Burrow's going at pick 43, Mahomes, you're fine just waiting, right? If I'm taking guys up top, I really like Lamar and I really like Josh Allen, the first two quarterbacks being drafted, then you can wait a hell of a long time and pair those guys with a Purdy or a Williams or a Penix, right? So that's kind of my philosophy in quarterback. And then to segue into wide receiver, Drake London is now to the point where I've seen people taking him in the first round, and I don't think that that's like that far off, right? They don't have a whole hell of a lot of other people on that team. And when you got a guy like Penix going so late, that's a nice easy stack for the pass catcher, right? You compare some other pieces along with that. Same with Marvin Harrison Jr. I really like stacking him with Kyler. I've mixed in some James Conner in there. Michael Wilson, who is their wide receiver too, is going in like the 18th, 19th round, right? Like he's going to get targets. He's going to make plays. He's a legitimate locked in wide receiver two on that team, right? So, the one thing that I found a little bit interesting that I kind of want to talk about is the little bit of a fall here for Justin Jefferson. And I don't really understand it too much. Um, he's not practicing. He's got a little hamstring injury, but like again, Vinny and I just talked about it. These training camps are so long now, and it's because the practice time has gotten shorter, right? So if a superstar like Justin Jefferson isn't practicing, it's not really that big of an issue for me personally, right? Um, you know, I love Lad McConkey, right? But we talk about him and Drake London going around the same ADP, but the Justin Jefferson, he slipped all the way down to 6, and I've taken him in drafts as late as 9 now. You know, now he in one draft I took him at 9, Puka went before him, and I just don't know. The Matt Stafford stress fracture thing's coming back. Devontae Adams is going to garner targets this year. I don't know how healthy he stays, but that's just one of those things where, yeah, I really don't know. As far as other guys in the first round that I kind of like, I think that Amon-Ra St. Brown is a really nice pick this year. He's probably the one Lion that I'm prioritizing getting onto my teams. Don't really love stacking with Goff. Doesn't really have a big, run threat, but I think St. Brown is going to be a lot more involved than he was maybe last year even. Um, the Lions certainly lost quite a bit of power on their offensive line. Frank Ragnow's gone. They lost their center. Um, I just think it's going to be a lot more quick, short throws for Jared Goff, right? So that's why I'm really liking him. I don't really understand the AJ Brown thing, him going so late. And then the big question, the weird one is Tyreek Hill. Now I know that he had a very, very bad season last year, right? Didn't even crack 1,000 yards. Um, really, really kind of an issue, right? Uh, Tyreek has missed some practice, but like here's a guy that, not a year ago was going in the first round. Now he's at, ADP 23. I've seen him drop to as low as 30 in the, into the third round almost. I mean, if he drops past 23, I'm taking Tyreek Hill every single time and just gonna bet on him that, he's gonna be that guy, right? Um, Garrett Wilson's kind of the same thing. I haven't taken very much JSN, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, and it's for this reason. He played most of his time out of the slot last year. They signed Cooper Cup and they have some other guys, right? I just think that, they got MVS to kind of stretch the field. I'm a little bit bearish on JSN this year. Great talent, fantastic year last year. But I just think if you're asking a guy that's traditionally run out of the slot, going that high in the draft, he's going before Xavier Worthy. He's going before, DK Metcalf. He's going before Cortland Sutton. He's going before Tet McMillan, which, Tet's a rookie. I get it. Some people are not a big fans. I personally am a huge fan of Tet McMillan. You've got Calvin Ridley, who had a great year last year by all means, and had he led the NFL in air yards last year. He also led the NFL in unrealized air yards last year, right? Averaged 12 fantasy points a game, broke 1,000 yards, right? Better year than Tyreek Hill. Now has a brand new quarterback, first overall pick in the draft, who can sling the rock. And this guy, you're telling me this guy is going as a locked in wide receiver one on his team at pick, 55? Like pretty close to where Travis Hunter and Zay Flowers are going. Like, I have a lot of Calvin Ridley, and he's an older player, right? He's not super young. He's 30 years old. So he's no spring chicken. So injuries can certainly be an issue there, but like, I mean, what are we talking about here? Another guy I like kind of down in this range quite a bit that I think really isn't getting the respect, who, again, he's locked in as the wide receiver one on the team, is Jacoby Myers. Um, Now, the Raiders are probably not going to throw as much this year, right? They drafted Genty, love Genty as a first round pick. They're going to run the shit out of the ball. I also like the fact that Raheem Mostert is in Vegas. You can pair Raheem Mostert with Genty, right? He goes way later in the draft. I think that's a nice little, tandem where you can draft there. Again, if you take only two quarterbacks, it allows you a little bit more play with some of this stuff. But like Jacoby Myers is going to get the run, right? Brock Bowers had an incredible year last year. Devontae Adams was there for a little bit. And this guy still had 87 catches for over 1,000 yards. Now, only 4 touchdowns, right? But he averaged 15 fantasy points per game. I mean, he had one, two, three, four single digit appearances, right? But he also had, 25, 21, you know, getting through, championship round last year against New Orleans, 17 points for a guy who you're taking as your wide receiver two or your three on your best ball team on with a much worse quarterback last year, right? I mean, look at the targets this guy was receiving: 10 targets, 9, 5, 9, 10, 11, 15, 6, 7, 9, 10 in the beginning of the year when Devontae Adams was there. Yeah, he wasn't getting many targets, right? 3, 5, 9, 10. But Devontae Adams leaves and he's almost double digits every single week. So I think that Jacoby Myers is really a guy that you need to take a little bit closer look at, right? You got the Green Bay wide receivers who are going right around pick, 85. And then really the next one down there that I think is just going way overlooked is Michael Pittman. I know everyone's on the Josh Downs thing. Josh Downs is right now going 20 picks in front of Michael Pittman. 20. I mean, I like Josh Downs as a player, but I don't like him 20, 80 P spots higher than Michael Pittman, right? Michael Pittman's not going to light the world on fire, right? But, you know, you're not taking this guy to be your wide receiver one. He had roughly the same amount of yards as Tyreek Hill did last year. 3 touchdowns. That wasn't great. But like, look who was playing quarterback for him. Now they're going to give Anthony Richardson a legitimate shot this year. Anthony Richardson wearing glasses now. I don't know if anybody noticed that. Um, maybe a little LASIK is in his future. Maybe that was the issue. I don't know, right? But I'm more than willing to take a gamble on Michael Pittman, right? Another couple of guys that are going kind of right next to each other. I don't think anybody can really figure it out. I'm splitting my exposure really between these two guys and seeing if basically one of them hits. Is Jaden Reed and Matthew Golden for the Packers. I get that everyone's enamored with Golden, haven't taken a wide receiver in the first round in a long time, right? But he's still a rookie. We haven't seen him play in the NFL. We know what Jaden Reed is. right? My biggest concern with Jaden Reed last year is that he was just not on the field all the time. And it was because the Packers were running a lot of 12 personnel, right? But he did have some spike games, 2 games over 30 points. So, like, at the end of the day, in weeks, 1 through 14, the real one that really hurt was week 14 and, trying to advance 0 points. A lot of people remember that who played best ball last year. People are just going to say, "Man, I'm just going to go with the rookie and see what he gets me." But Jaden Reed is a seminal piece to that Packers wide receiving core, and I really don't think that you can ignore that. Some other guys that are going much later that I like taking some stabs on that I think are just maybe a little bit under the radar. I think Tyler Lockett is a really, really interesting option. I know they've drafted a couple of rookies. They got Aomir from Stanford, right? But Lockett again, a little bit older. If he can stay healthy, I think he's going to be a pretty nice piece of that offense. Darius Slayton is a guy who's just going to be there, right? I mean, obviously, it's not a great, fantastic piece, but these are guys going in the very, 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 pick 200, right? We're not talking about drafting these guys super early, but a lot of these times, if you can find somebody down here, right, that can make a legitimate impact for their team, I think that's one that you got to focus on. I think one that a lot of people kind of aren't looking at a whole bunch is Jalen Naylor. He had a really, really nice year last year. We know at least for the first 3 weeks, right, that Addison is going to be out. He's suspended, right? So right away there, you're going to think that he's probably going to get, be a little bit more of a factor. 6 touchdowns last year for a guy that again is going pick. What is he at right now? 212, right, towards the end of draft. Why not take a chance on that? If you take JJ early and you take, you know, JJ McCarthy, his quarterback, pick 120, you can take Naylor and have a really nice secondary stack there. And, Naylor's going to be involved all year. I don't care that, Hawkins can come back and all this stuff. Both of their running backs are a little bit questionable up in there. He's a guy that's going to get legitimate targets all year this year. So those are some guys kind of really at the end of drafts that I'm interested in. And probably, two of them that I'm the most interested in are Demarcus Robinson for the 49ers and Roman Wilson for the Steelers. Now, the Steelers are not going to throw the ball a whole lot. But by all reports out of camp, Roman Wilson is locked in as the number 2 receiver opposite of DK Metcalf. DK is going to garner a lot of attention in the passing game. You're going to get Calvin Austin mostly running out of the slot. He's their slot guy. I mean, Roman Wilson's going to be involved. He just got to stay healthy, right? Had a really hard time with his health last year. Didn't get to play a whole lot. Uh, um, but a second year wide receiver who, say what you want about Arthur Smith. It's the same system they're staying with, right? So I think that he's interesting, but Demarcus Robinson is a legitimate player. Now he may get suspended for a game or two. He had a legal issue that he's dealing with, but I really don't care. At pick 226, he's a guy that if I'm taking Brock Purdy late, if I took Christian McCaffrey early, maybe I took George Kittle, who I have a ton of. He's an easy piece that like they paid him $10 million, and they're not just like if you look at the Niners wide receiver room, it's nothing to write home about. Like this guy is going to be playing a lot when he is active and out there on the field, right? So that's kind of where I'm thinking. And then really the last part we're talking about is tight end, and tight end is definitely an interesting one this year. Um, I think, that first tier, Kittle, McBride, and Bowers. Um, I think I like Bowers a lot. Trust me, I do. I think where he's going is just too early, right? If, basically 10 picks later, you can get McBride, and then 20 picks later, I can get George Kittle around where Bowers is going, right? At that ADP. Let me talk about the guys he's going around right now. Let me pull that up. Okay. So you've got Drake London, Brock Bowers, AJ Brown, and Devon A. Chain all kind of going right around that same area. I'm sorry, but I just like all of those other guys better than Bowers, especially when I can get a guy like Kittle 20 picks later. Like that's just that's an easy that's why I have so much Kittle, right? Kittle's going to be involved. Don't have a great wide receiver room. I don't think that Ayuk is going to be back until early November, right? That's just the one that like it's just an easy pick for me, right? Um Going down, really like Evan Ingram. Sean Payton Witten got him for a very specific reason. Um, Obviously, I think that a lot of people forget that Evan Ingram at one time was a first round pick. Um, really dominant threat in the red zone. I really like doing a Broncos stack because I can get Bo Nix at a reasonable ADP. I can get Cortland Sutton at a reasonable ADP, right? And if we talk about touchdown regression from a guy, I know he's on a different team this year, but Evan Ingram had one touchdown last year. I mean, I would bet quite a bit of money that if he's healthy for the entire year, right, um, he's going to have more than one touchdown. you know, I put his over under touchdowns probably at about 6.5. That may be a little ambitious. 5.5 might be actually a little bit better number. But I just think that, Evan Ingram, what are we talking about here, right? David Njoku, I think, is really attractive. Colston Loveland really was kind of going pretty. His ADP has dropped quite a bit as the process has kind of gone along. Um, but I think that I was kind of a little scared that Keenan Allen was going to go back there, and I thought that might hurt Loveland a little bit. Um, but they're going to run a lot of 12 personnel, and you know, he's going to be involved in the offense. And at ADP 118, that's an easy one for me. Kincaid is a mystery, right? Taking a lot of Kincaid. He's going way later than he was last year. 130. I often see him drop into the 135, 140. I've taken him at 144. He drops with the uncertainty of, I like taking Josh Allen early. I can take Coleman, I can take Kincaid, I can take Ray Davis, and I have a really nice four-man Buffalo stack there. Again, best ball, you have no idea. And Buffalo is a great team to draft a lot of these guys late because you don't know where the production is going to come from. And it's probably going to come from a lot of different places on the Buffalo squad this year. And you don't have to guess. You just have to make sure that you have enough of a high powered offense. They're the second highest implied average team total this year, predicted to score about 25.4 points per game, I believe it is. That's number two behind the Ravens. Niners are in the top five, right? So I think that's a nice one. Jake Ferguson is another one for the Dallas Cowboys. I've taken a lot of CD Lamb early. They're going to have to throw the shit out of the ball, right? I like Dak. You can pair him with that stack. Maybe you don't get Lamb, but you get Dak, Pickens, and Ferguson and Jaden Blue. Again, really, really nice option for stacking that doesn't cost you a lot. Brenton Strange is another one. We saw Kate Otten really kind of excel in the Liam Cohen offense. Luke Farrell is gone. He's with the Niners now. Strange is the guy there, right? Ingram gone. He's the guy there now. So I really, really like that option as well. I think Mason Taylor's interesting. The Fields thing scares me a little bit, but it is what it is. Uh, I scan past Kyle Pitts. I mean, this is a safe space here. I've taken some Kyle Pitts, okay, but again, he's going 40 to 50 picks later this year than he did last year. You know, um, I mean, if he's going 5 to 6 rounds later this year than he did last year. Okay, it makes sense. If I take London, I can take Penix, I can take Pitts, and I have a really nice three-person stack. I've got a couple of nice Bijan, London, Penix, Pitts teams, right? Like I really, really like that option. So it's just one of those things. The flashpoint for a lot of people has been Arroyo, right? Really, really physically talented rookie, Elijah Arroyo, for the Seahawks. They cut Noah Fant. His really only competition is AJ Barner, and this guy is an absolute freak. I mean, he is a physical specimen. If you go look at some of the numbers and some of the top speeds that he put out there, I mean, I think his top speed last year in college was over 26 miles an hour. I mean, this guy's 260. He is no spring chicken and he can fucking move. So, like, where he's going, pick 190. I think that's great. I think it's fucking hilarious as hell that so many people were taking Darren Waller, and now he's on the PUP. I have zero Darren Waller. Very, very happy about that. Um, One guy I want to talk about is Kansas City. Okay, Travis Kelsey is going in like the 80s, right? Let me pull it up real quick. Where is Kelsey going? All right, right now, yeah, 70, 78. I see him fall very often. I'm really interested to take Travis Kelsey and then pair him with Noah Gray on a three tight end build. Um, if Travis Kelsey gets hurt, Noah Gray is going to be a factor. Noah Gray had 5 touchdowns last year, right? He had a 20 plus point game. Like, you don't get that out of any player going down in the 224s, right? That's very difficult to find. He's a legitimate part of that offense. Now, I know that Rice is going to be back, at some point, obviously, this year after, his suspension gets announced. But like, Kelsey is probably his last year, right? They are going to Noah Gray is a part of their offense, right? So like, it wasn't great that he didn't really help out and the had 10 points in week 15, 2 and 16, and 1.6 in week 17. Okay, great. But like, for a guy who had 22 points, 18 points, 10, three double digit games, four double digit games, excuse me, at pick 225, you could do a lot worse. I mean, Tyler Higbee's going before him. Dawson Knox is going down around where he gets taken. Um, you know, Grant Calcaterra. These are guys who, I have no idea who they're going to be. To round out tight end, the like sleeper of all sleepers, who I have taken some shots on my Tennessee teams is going to be Gunnar Helm. Um, He's listed as a second tight end on the unofficial first depth chart that came out. Um, obviously he's going to be backing up Chiga Conquo, but like, let's not make any bones about it. Chiga Conquo is not some like world beater tight end on a new coaching staff who went out and drafted this guy for a very specific reason as your last pick in the draft. I think Gunnar Helm is more than okay to take. I'm probably going to end up having him on, 5 to 7% of my teams, and really prioritizing to take him where I've taken Cam Ward and Calvin Ridley and some of these other guys on the Titans. But, again, the Titans play in not a great division. Pretty easy schedule this year. Let's go take a look at their schedule real quick. Let me pull it up. Bear with me. Let's see here. Titans, if my phone can move its ass. Titans. Really great podcast right now. Phone's not loading. Okay. All right. Well, guess we just the world doesn't want us to look at um Tennessee's games. All right, here we go. Yeah, they open up with Denver, LA, Rams, Houston, Arizona, Raiders, New England, Indianapolis, Chargers, Houston, Seattle, Jacksonville, Cleveland. They play the Niners, Kansas City, New Orleans, Jacksonville. So, you know, not a good division, obviously, right? Arizona's not a very good defense. So, I mean, I think that Gunnar Helm, again, what you're looking for, really, in my opinion, in best ball with rookies is guys who are not going to come in and make an impact weeks 1 through 5, right? You're looking at the guys who are going to start to express themselves and really assert themselves later into the season. And with the last pick in the draft, those are the kind of guys that I'm looking for. And at tight end, where really nobody knows, if I can get a premium guy like Kittle and then 1 to 2 other dart throws, That's really, kind of what I'm looking for, right? So we're at about 40 minutes. That was a little bit longer than I was expecting to go, but look, I really, really love best ball. Follow me at JJ McIntosh on Twitter, X, like, subscribe. We're going to be doing, showdown shows. We're going to be doing some more updates to the best ball shows. Shoot me a question on Twitter, interact, shoot me a DM if you have a question. You know, Travel around quite a bit for work. I'm in a hotel room right now in Portland, Oregon, doing this, right? But like, it also gives me some time to answer questions and interact. And we're all, there's 600,000 people going to play in the Millie, which is the only best ball tournament that I play in. There's no trade secrets here. I love talking football with people. If you have a question about process, what are your builds usually look like? Everybody who talks to me on Twitter and interacts with me knows I'm a pretty open book. So I'm here to help. Look forward to talking with everybody all year. Good luck. Start drafting now. I would suggest slow drafts. Really, really, really fun, no pressure, right? You can take your time. It's like an 8-hour clock. It's like 10 hours overnight. It's really kind of the thing that I really like to do quite a bit. So let's have fun. Like, share, subscribe, helps us out. We do this for fun. We're just trying to get the information that we have out there to as many people as possible, just like me, to kind of help you guys out. Hey, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Hope everybody has a nice night and enjoy watching football tomorrow. Thank you.